Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of From No Crypto to No Crypto. I'm your host, Crypto Coach, Blockchain Wayne. Today we're joined by Bryan from Argos. Bryan, man, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, excited to be here.
Absolutely, man. You and I have met quite a few times, both online and in person, over the last, what is it, year or two, it seems. So excited to get you on here, talk about what you guys are doing at Argos. But man, before we jump into that, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Kind of what have you done in the past and what led you to working in Web3 related industries?
Definitely. I've been in the kind of sales world for a long time, focusing on, spent like 5 years in background screening, which kind of led me into the identity verification realm, because it was kind of that focused on that onboarding process. It made me excited to find ways of making these processes smoother and better. That was more for the job applications, but this is more for the end users. But it's very kind of easily transferred, I'd say. So,
Gotcha. So tell me, so what was your personal intro to whether it's Bitcoin or crypto Web3? What was that like for you?
it was definitely an experience. I would say, I think I got into it really a little bit in 2018, and then 19 was when I really started to kind of invest in it, kind of learn about it, just dive head first, and have no idea what I'm doing at first, and just kind of learn. And then in 2020, 2021, I started to really dive into it because I had a little more free time during COVID, of course. We all did. So it made it so much easier, and I started thinking about it in terms of like what the future of money can be, and I personally think that that's somewhere that makes sense.
Gotcha. Gotcha, man. So yeah, so Argos, you guys are doing a lot when it comes to identity. And so tell us a little bit about that. So tell us what Argos is and what you guys are looking to accomplish.
Definitely. So Argos is a digital identity verification platform or KYC platform, focused on not just crypto and blockchain world, but also for online gaming, um, e-commerce, really any process where you need to know who your end user is. With regulations coming and getting more and more strict, especially in the crypto world, there's a need to know that you're not funding bad actors or not sending money to bad actors, and just knowing where that money is going. Because, like when you sign up for any of the big exchanges, you have to do a selfie and a picture of your ID. We can do that. We're also focused more on the fraud piece. Like, are you creating fake accounts on these websites? People like that, that are trying to defraud the system, take advantage of those platforms where you have someone creating 100 accounts to take advantage of the $200 in Bitcoin sign up bonus, things like that. We're seeing that more and more, not just in the exchange world, but also in the gaming world, is where it's starting to pick up, where when you have like loot boxes and other, when you have a marketplace on the site, you have to do some sort of identity verification because, if someone's under 18 in the US or in another country, it could be a different age, or, has restrictions. They can't be allowed to make those purchases or share that money.
Gotcha. And it's funny enough. So I think back to my intro into like Bitcoin and crypto, right? And so 2016 was when I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna take a serious look at Bitcoin, because earlier than that, it was just every time I'd hear about it, it was just dismissive, right? And man, I went down the rabbit hole hard and just kind of open permissionless, right? Anybody can do anything. And so if you and I would have been talking, say 8, 9 years ago, I'd have been completely against KYC in general, right? You gave it, through what you said, you've given a lot of good use case story. Okay, that sounds good as an ideology, but it just doesn't work in the business world. So, but I do feel, KYC, there's I guess some fragmented systems around it, right? So and it's definitely, and most people look at it from, oh, it's regulations. I got to verify I'm just not sending money to bad actors. But at the same time, you gave some good examples already, right? If I'm a project and I'm going to be building out something that has incentives or is going to do, like, say, maybe an airdrop, I want to make sure those airdrops are going to real people and not, a few hundred accounts that are all controlled by one person or entity that's just going to collect everything, dump it, sell it, right? So is that kind of, you guys see that a lot too in terms of KYC?
Yeah, that's a big area that we're focusing on, especially in the crypto world, because that's happening every day. We're seeing more and more of it. I know I am on all the different chains, seeing more pump and dumps where it's like, hey, here's the airdrop, and boom, the next day it's all gone because they all sold immediately, but it was really just one person.
Gotcha. Yeah, and when you, I guess the question I'm trying to get here is, when you look at KYC, right? It's not something that's very sexy, and most people are not really not interested in that. But what do you guys offer that's different than what's out there? Because obviously, there's been KYC. I remember, in fact, my first Bitcoin purchase was actually through a Bitcoin ATM because Coinbase was having trouble with KYC verification at the time when I tried signing up in 2016. So I actually bought my first 3 Bitcoin straight from a Bitcoin ATM. But that process has evolved over the years. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is what makes you guys different. And let's break that into 2 parts, because the second part was going to be more AI related. So let's start with what makes you guys different than what's out there already.
Definitely. So what makes Argos different? A few items. So first, I would say the ease of use. Our goal is constantly making that process easier and more efficient for the end user. That's our focus. We're looking into ways of creating reusable ID so that you don't just have to go through it one time, you just have to go through it one time. You don't have to go through it, for, like you said, Coinbase, then the next game that you want to play, and then 5 other places. So we're trying to figure out a way of making that easy. Where the issue becomes, and what we're trying to work on is who controls that data, because that's a big regulation issue. So we need to make sure that the end user is actually in control of that data and not us as the company or the other companies that would have access to that information. So that's one of the big reasons why we're trying to figure that out to help the crypto community. Because again, like you said already, it's got a bad rap in the community of like, the whole goal was, you have a wallet ID and that's your ID. That's who you are. Right. But there is a time and place where the governments need to know funding bad actors. The game needs to know, are you just going to, are you creating multiple accounts? How can we ensure one user per account? How can we ensure that, you're going through all the AML regulations, like wallet reviews and things like that?
Yeah. And at minimum, I mean, proof of a unique human, right? Yeah. I'm not one person with 20 accounts. I'm a unique human being. And I know we've seen different things come out around that, right? World ID is one that was still very controversial. But I think, like something like that, maybe not them specifically, but that concept of where, even if you're in an environment where, okay, in this environment, you don't have to give your sensitive data, at least some sort of biometric to say, okay, I am unique. I'm a special person. There's no other parameter like that. It could be important. So that's kind of what I see in the world.
That's part of our goal of that, is so that you only share the information that company needs. It's not everything. They don't necessarily need your address. They don't necessarily even really need your name, potentially. They might just need that you're over 18, that you are a unique user. And you mentioned some of those large projects that have tried. And the tough thing is, in this whole situation, is these become honeypots of information. So we have to all be careful of who has control of all of this data.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you mentioned earlier about only doing one time and creating a reusable credential. Man, that's so important, because I kind of, at this point, I realize that my data is out there. It's probably everywhere, right? But I can think of just off the top of my head right now 5 different exchanges that I have KYC'd on that are no longer around.
Yep.
You know, all the way back to the Bittrex days, some of these other exchanges that I had to do that KYC and give that sensitive information to everyone. And it's usually your whole ID. It's not, and you know, it's not just certain credentials. And right, it should be based off of what they need. What do they need to verify? Residency, whatever it may be. And so, I mean, obviously crypto plays in, but we're going to see so many different traditional companies that are integrate Web3. And, you know, if Nike comes out with a utility token tomorrow, what's going to stop them from, you know, I know they've dabbled in Web3. That's kind of why I bring them up. But what's going to stop, you know, people from trying to make a bunch of fake accounts to claim some sort of airdrop or utility? Or in some cases, there's actually activity that has to take place to earn tokens for an airdrop, right? So, but then you end up with these airdrop forms where they're just going through the motions of a bunch of different accounts and activity. So outside of that, tie that in with AI. So how complex has KYC become with AI? I mean, are you seeing, I mean, I think an increase in like fake accounts just because it's so much easier to automate bot accounts.
Mm-hmm. So it's two-sided. So, I mean, the more we're using AI to combat AI. So it's kind of a funny story, but you know, we're using AI to ensure that the KYC results are posted in less than 3 seconds. You know, the whole goal is, again, keeping that process quick and easy for the end user. On the other side of that, you know, AI is creating all these fake accounts or people using bot farms, things like that, making it so easy to create a synthetic ID. You know, we can only combat so far. You know, at the end of the day, a hacker, anyone like that, that's trying to game the system is always going to find a way to be ahead of us. We're just trying to combat everything that we can figure out and get ahead of. Things like, I mean, if you try to do like a picture of your computer or print out an ID and use those things, you know, we're checking to see if there's AI injection in the image that you're posting. You know, we've caught that a ton of times. We had one person, I think he submitted about 1,000 in a matter of like 2 or 3 days. And, you know, at the end of the day, our goal is trying to do that up front and do that before the game, the exchange, whoever gets charged the full process fee. Because, right, yeah, again, it adds up for the company itself. Because if someone hits it 1,000 times, it's, you know, 1,000 submissions. So right, trying to figure out ways of combating that early on, things like tracking their IP address just to ping it to see if it's risky. It's been flagged risky, or, you know, again, for a lot of these companies, they need to make sure you're not using a proxy or a VPN.
Yeah. Gotcha. It's funny you say using AI to combat AI, because that's what's really necessary. I kind of get, you know, people say, what's crypto going to do when quantum computing comes out? I was like, going to be fought with quantum computing, right? So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. That's exactly what I thought of. It's the same concept. It's not like, you know, the bad actors just have access to technology that no one else will as well. So that's definitely something that could be necessary. So, you know, I can think of so many different things out there where, like I said, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, I'd have been, you just said KYC. I'm like, I just rolled my eyes and been like, nah, we don't need that. We need open, permissionless everything. And it's not just crypto, but you think, so someone, for instance, I'll give you an example. Someone is using, say like a new Web3 social media platform. They obviously don't want to gather all the user data. So if they were talking to Argos, what kind of data would you guys collect to verify that they're dealing with a real human and not just a bot farm?
So depending on what they feel comfortable with. So we're always going to have a conversation to understand what's the main goal and what's their focus. So do they need to just do a selfie, prove humanity, and then prove that the next time that face tries to create another account, they can prove that, hey, you already have an account with us. Please log in, basically, rather than just using your email and saying, hey, this email already exists, when I could create 100,000 emails in 5 minutes with AI. So depends on what their needs are. But those would be like the top two that I would say, is starting with just proof of humanity. So we take a quick selfie. A QR code pops up and says, hey, use your phone to make sure that you're a live person. And then ping that database to see if that image already exists. and that's it. And then remove it or vectorize the image. So basically, for a lot of those companies, they no longer have any PII. They no longer have any liability. There's no real risk for them. So they're saying, okay, we don't have any information on you. All we can tell is that you're a unique user.
Gotcha. So that's important to understand, because I think a lot of us, even to this day, still think of KYC as a all or nothing thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to do KYC, I've got to give my name, my social security number, my driver's license ID, all these different things. But thinking it in a different light, it's really what part of a user's identity would be important to verify for your platform, right? So like what I gave an example of is they don't need all that information. They just need some sort of level of verification. Whereas if I'm on a gambling site, right, I may have to verify my residency or something else based on where my age, residency, right, those things that are important. Yeah. And if I'm dealing with large financial matters, then I probably have to do like a full identity type verification. Yep. And that's important to think, because one thing I was thinking would be good for the listeners that are listening to this to hear about, because they may, I mean, I don't know, you probably get this a lot, but how to, there's a lot of interesting topics out there. How do you make KYC, sexy, right? So maybe that ought to be a marketing theme for you guys, like making KYC sexy or something. But anyway, it's kind of that whole process of also realizing what's necessary, and don't have that immediate knee-jerk reaction. When I see KYC, I'm like, oh my God. Like if there's like an airdrop or there's some other way where I'm participating in something financial that could be harmed by bots triggering it, then I want to look for that certain level of verification to make sure that, hey, this is something, maybe I'm buying a token of them. I don't want it to just be able to be botted and dumped for different projects. And then also identify when there may be some kind of overreach, right? Overreach where, maybe this company is trying to get every bit of my data when they don't really need everything. I think that's the hard part, right? What suggestions? I know this is not your particular wheelhouse, but you deal a lot with KYC. When people feel like me, all right, I've KYC'd on so many platforms that are not existent anymore. What do I do to protect that data that's out there?
It's difficult. I mean, definitely not my expertise, and not a lawyer or anything like that. So I don't want to say anything that's out of line or anything. But at the end of the day, a lot of these places don't need all that information, like you were just saying. I mean, but it also helps in some capacity, because I know early on when I got into crypto, I fell for a lot of scams. Like I tried to join airdrops, try to join giveaways and things, and I signed up and didn't know what I was getting myself into. Yeah. Luckily, didn't give up a lot of information on those, which is probably the saving grace part of that. But if there was KYC, or if there was something there, I think nowadays it makes people feel a little bit more safe about the project, because they had to implement that. They're paying for that to be done. Why would they do that if they're just going to go around tomorrow and try and pump and dump, make $1 million and run away? I don't see why they would set up something with a company, set up that whole integration, pay whatever amount of money, and then try and run away with that. It'd be much more difficult, because now not only does that company have that information, so we could pass that over of the company to the authorities. I mean, they say, hey, you were doing business with them, where are the documents? Where's that information coming from?
Sure.
So a little bit of protection there, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, looking at it from both sides. All right. So when we look at Argos, what kind of so there may be people listening that are running companies. What kind of customers, clientele? What would be the perfect, I guess, partners you guys are looking for in this space?
Some of the perfect partners that we've found is really online gaming, especially in the blockchain world. That area has been, it takes off and it slows down. It takes off and it slows down. But there's definitely some big players that we already work with. And, that's an area that we think this fits perfectly with, especially if it's once we launch the reusability of the ID, because at the end of the day, most of those companies, they want as little information as they can. And if they can just say, hey, I'm requesting this information, and then you basically through SMS verification or something else say, here's that information only, and now you prove that you are human, that you're a unique account, and that you've been through KYC. And if needed, they can figure out and grab more information. But for the time being, that's all they need. They're done.
Gotcha. All right, cool. So, Bryan, also, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about Argos, what you guys are doing, and any contact info that they could reach out to?
Definitely. So our website is www.argos, A-R-G-O-S, identity, IDENTITY.com. And, all of our information's there. You can see our API guides. You can see our privacy policies and things like that. What we're allowed to do with that information. You can read into like our GDPR compliance, things like that, where, it just builds trust, ISO certification. You can also reach out to me directly at BNOLLER at argosidentity.com. Whatever's easiest for you. But there's a lot of information online. There's a lot of information on KYC in general, so it's a lot to sift through. We always look at ourselves as more of the consultancy side to try and help make sure that you're building out the right process for your business and not just implementing something and saying, oh, well, we're going to collect your ID, your selfie, and run all these other searches when you don't really need it for your business. So we create everything specifically for your business. We help you build on the platform. We can have you up and running and implemented in 24 hours, realistically. So that's one of our big pieces, is getting you up and running quickly, especially if you are moving from another KYC vendor that for some reason isn't living up to their word for you.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, and that's important. And we'll have all those details down below, so definitely check that out. And really, I think that the reason I felt this was really important to get you on a podcast too, to think about this, is because we're going to see, I think, with the narrative around crypto shifting in terms of positive regulation, positive legislation being proposed everywhere, we're going to see a lot of people that have been on the sidelines. And this is where I say we're going to see that bleed over, where we talk a lot about crypto Web3, right? And you're going to see a ton of companies that have been wanting to get their emergence into crypto and Web3. And they're going to, they're feeling more comfortable about doing that now. So a traditional company launching a token, launching a utility token, a membership token, or any other kind of thing. And those come with risk of bots and fake accounts and all these different things, and being able to verify that you're following the regulations in the area where you're operating. So this is why I felt it was important today, because a lot of those companies, even if they were interested a year ago, right, they were standing on the sidelines just looking at it. And I'm starting to see a lot more interest from people that were in those spaces that are now like, hey, I've had this idea for 2 years now. How can I incorporate this? What can I do? And we can help them all day with the tech. But if they need to have a certain level to follow certain regulation guidelines, prevent bots and everything else, they're going to need a good KYC provider. So what do you see? You mentioned that credential earlier too, and this is one thing I just thought about touching on before we wrap up. What are your thoughts? There's been a lot of talk around DID, right? Digital identity. What are your thoughts around that? What have you guys seen or maybe done so far?
I think that's our main goal with this whole use case for reusability of the ID, is sharing the information that's necessary and having it encrypted in transit, at rest, making sure that the information being shared is only the information needed. I don't want to say that it's perfectly, decentralized identity. I think that's what the goal is eventually, but at the end of the day, fully decentralized identity is going to be very difficult, because at some point in that process, some company, something needs your actual information, and that has to be tracked, because if you just gave someone those keys or someone took those keys, there's no proof anymore. Just like if you gave someone your private keys to your account, to your wallet,
Yes, they can assume your identity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's something to think about, right? We talk ideologically about this would be great, but right, you've got to think about those what if situations like that because people lose their private keys, they lose access to say their Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other crypto.
Mhm.
Someone takes over your identity, that's a whole different ball game, right?
And that's why a lot of it, what we're doing is using the selfie to
Yeah,
to prove that it's the same person. Maybe 6 months, or you try to make a deposit on a platform, or try to withdraw money from a platform. That's when they ask you, hey, just do a quick selfie. We just want to make sure that it's still your account, before you take that money and run. Because
yeah,
I on even the sports betting platform, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten notifications saying, hey, someone tried to withdraw money from your account. I'm like, how? Why aren't you forcing it and doing something about that? That's scary, especially when it comes to our crypto, where there's a lot more money there
yeah.
potentially. You don't typically leave as much money in a sports betting account
Right,
as opposed to crypto.
right, yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, Bryan, man, it's been a pleasure having you on, talking about everything KYC related, what you guys are doing at Argos. I know there's going to be a lot more need for KYC, and I love kind of I don't want to say fragment. It's not a good word, but basically the approach where, right? I was trying to think of the right way to describe it. What you guys do in terms of the KYC level matches the level of need for
Mhm.
each platform. So you just need to verify you got a real user versus more. I think this helps so much. If I'm paying for marketing on a social media platform like Facebook, even right, and I
Mhm.
know that like out of my 1 million impressions I'll get on an ad spend, that 75% of that is bots. That impacts my ROI, everything else. So people need to think about identity differently and what KYC is. And I've even learned over the years you can't just have a negative outlook on KYC in general because it does serve a great purpose. So, any final words before we wrap up?
No, would love to speak with anyone. Any questions? Like respond to any of the negative looks on KYC in general, and continue that type of conversation around why it's actually necessary. Why we're doing what we're doing here with digital identity verification, and then how we're modularizing it to make it impactful for the business, instead of make sure that you're only doing what you need and not a package saying, hey, you have to do everything. We want to
Yeah,
make it simple, make it easy. Our goal is to make that process as simple and easy for the end user as well as the business.
gotcha. Cool. Well, definitely everyone check it out. Hit the description here. We got all the ways you can contact Bryan and his team. Bryan, man, thanks again for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening. And we'll catch you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.